Episode 306, Tesla Review Update. Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me. Hope you're doing okay. It's a lovely sunny day today. It's quite warm. It's September as I speak in 2020. And we're sort of in a level 3 lockdown in Dublin and Ireland. But regardless of that, I went for a drive in a Tesla. So I went up to Belfast. I do go to Belfast quite a lot. I don't know. It's just a different scene, different place, different style than Dublin, and it's a bit of a drive. You feel like you've gone somewhere, and I do find there's a contrast, I think, to the Republic of Ireland. It's interesting anyway up there. So I do go there and usually stay in a nice hotel and just chill out for a night or two or something like that. So I was there yesterday evening, and I stayed in the Fitzwilliam Hotel, which I've never stayed in before. It was all right. Not the tallest hotel. I've stayed in most of the hotels in Belfast. Certainly the taller ones, shall we say? And it's been a bit of a thing. I've been going through the tallest hotels. In Ireland, that you can actually stay in, tallest buildings, but you can actually stay in. I think I do an episode. I can't remember which one it was now. Episode 264. Anyhow, so I stayed there, and it was quite nice. I took some pictures and some. I got a room that had like corner windows. I always look for the floor to ceiling windows. From a height looking down, I think it's to me it's better than a flat screen TV. I don't watch much TV. To look down at the world going past, and when I was there, I was looking down, and there's a net type curtain, but when I look out, I pull it to one so I can see out. I was looking down at a particular junction, looking down at all the people having a glass of red wine, and just looking at the world going by, and I remember thinking as I looked down that no one ever looks up. No one was looking up, and all of a sudden, these two young women with the mother, they just sort of looked up and started waving. So I waved back again. I'm actually waving now, that's weird. I waved back down at them, and it was just funny. So people do occasionally look up. But it was actually on a junction, the corner. I think it's Grosvenor Road is the actual road itself. But it was on a junction, and when I was looking down, I noticed you can see right into people's vehicles. I didn't realise that, if you're an elevated viewpoint looking out, I suppose if you're on a bus, you can do this. So, you can look into people's cars. Because I look into people's cars and you see that, it's an odd thing. It's sort of a crazy thing when I was looking at this, because you look down and you see people sitting there, obviously the driver, and usually there's a passenger anyway, but there did seem to be anyway in Belfast yesterday. And they're driving past, and it's just this funny, they're sitting there in a seat, whizzing along, and even in the centre of Belfast, they were still doing 30 or 40 kilometres an hour. They were going quite fast, and looking down at people who were just so relaxed, just sitting there. If the woman's the passenger, she's probably got a handbag on her lap, and there was a definite consistency there of, it was funny, and just to see, I think you think it's quite a private space, the car. And then to be able to look so easily, down through the windscreen, and some of them had these fantastic panoramic sunroofs as well. But, and then you might see a man and woman, and they're holding hands, as they're driving along. It's just incredible. I sort of love that, So I was watching that, and I've got this iPhone. It's a couple of years old now, but it does these time lapse, I think they call it, aren't they? So luckily there was like a metal rail across the middle of the window, and I was able to rest my phone on it. And I did these time lapse, some during the daytime and some at night, and it looks speeded up, everything's going fast. And I realised how busy a city Belfast was. I especially realised this morning at about 6 a.m. when it just came alive, and there was mad traffic. There was buses and delivery. We all know what goes in the city, don't we? But there was just incredible the amount of traffic. I thought, wow. From about 6 a.m. there was a bit of a lull between 4 and 5 a.m. I wasn't awake all night, but I think it was around 4:30. I woke up to this awful noise of this massive wagon, I think. I didn't actually look closely at it. I think they were either cleaning the streets or they were taking refuse, rubbish away, I don't know. But it was an awful noise, but then there was this calm, and there was like no one around, no one walking on the streets. no vehicles or anything, just this lovely calmness, which I sort of liked. And it did remind me a little bit of one of these apocalypse movies, the zombies where everybody just disappeared. Like, it's still civilization, there's still electricity there, it's still lit up, but there's nobody there. So I'm assuming that's how they make a lot of these movies, that they pick a really obscure time of day or night. And you can do that. So I thought it was interesting. I have to say, I wouldn't have been happy walking around down there with it completely empty. It would be quite creepy on all sorts of levels. But anyhow, so I was in Belfast. So to get to Belfast, I had a Tesla. I haven't been using the BMW for long journeys. My rear driver's side wheel, alloy wheel, has a crack in it. It's a very hairline crack. And it's been there probably 5 or 6 years. And I can just keep putting the air in the tyre. It's a slow puncher. And I've got to get it welded. But it's just at the moment with things are closed and some are open, I don't know. But there is a company that will weld it for me that I've got to have a look at. But I have this fear at the moment. If I go on a long journey, I'm tempting fate, and maybe at high speed, it's going to explode on me, and I don't want my wheel shattering at high speed. So any long journeys now, I've been renting the old Tesla. So I got a Model S again. I've done a few podcasts about Tesla and the Model S. Now this particular one, there's two types of models that they have in this hire company of Model S, and one is basically has no adaptive cruise control, has no autopilot. It's just a Tesla, but without all the fancy stuff you want in a Tesla. Yeah. And then the other one, they have this Model S, which has basically autopilot, the enhanced package and everything else. So, I first hired the simple, we'll call it the simple Tesla, and it was off because it wouldn't update the software and not even adaptive cruise control. It had the switch for it, but it didn't work. It was just normal cruise control. And I did have a few warnings, some basic warnings that you're going to hit someone. And I drove that, but I enjoyed having that vehicle. Looking back on it now, and I probably did maybe 1,000 kilometers in it. But why it was really good was because I didn't have all this autopilot fancy stuff, and I could drive it like a car, like a normal car. And I think that was very good. It was very interesting. I didn't find it any harder to drive than any other, a car. It's obviously a high-end car, the Model S. In Ireland, I think it's around €100,000, 110,000, which, is they're very much the high-end sort of cars, like the expensive, end of BMWs and Mercedes and things like that. So, having driven that, it was a good experience because I could feel what the steering was like, the acceleration, the braking, everything I had to do manually, the lane changing and all the things that can be done with autopilot. And it was good just to get to know the car. And my first impression, and now my BMW is a 5 Series. It's very long. It's a big executive car. There's a lot of room inside it, But my first impression of when I first collected the Model S, which is this basic one, was the sheer size of it. It is huge, physically massive. It's wide, and that's the thing that caught me out was the width. It's much wider than my BMW. There's even a rumour that it's wider than some Rolls Royces. And it's long, Now, the length wasn't such a big deal, but coupled with the width. So where I actually picked this Tesla up is actually in a multi-story car park. It's on a certain level. They have all the cars charged up there, and it's contactless. There's no people around. You have an app and all the rest of it, and you verify who you are, you pay and all the rest of it through the app. And then you pick it. It's a nice little system. I mean, I don't like hanging out with the general public anyway, so it's quite a nice thing. So you go there, beforehand you book it, obviously, paid for it, whatever, and then you go pick it up and... the app itself, it'll verify it's you, start the contract, sign the contract, whatever, inspect the car, open the car, all the rest of it, and then the app will unlock and lock the car. So it's quite a nice system. So I was very annoyed it didn't have autopilot when I first got it. But I said to myself, hold on a second, it's still a Tesla, it's still that mad acceleration, it's still the handling. It's a dual drive, one's a 4-wheel drive, dual motors. So I drove it, and I think I drove that to Belfast and back, and it was fantastic. It was a really nice drive, There was a few things I noticed very quickly, apart from the sheer size and getting out of the multi-story car park and trying to not hit the big high curbs that they have. Apart from that, I did notice going through the streets of Dublin, some of the streets are a little bit, shall we say, lumpy. They're not in a great state of repair, and I did notice that I could hear vibration noises in the actual, I'm not going to say the chassis, but in the body somewhere. So I was getting like a flapping sound on one corner, like near the suspension. I couldn't work out if it was the suspension or something near the suspension. Now, don't get me wrong, the car was fine. It was, handling the bumps okay. It had the suspension, it raised and lowered and all sorts of clever things. But I did notice was sort of a rattle near the front passenger side suspension. And I also noticed that somewhere in the roof, it didn't that particular one didn't have a sunroof, but it did have the glass roof. Somewhere in the roof, and I couldn't really, only at speed I could notice it, but there was definitely some sort of rattling going on, which I couldn't really identify exactly where it was coming from. But and that was on the motorway. So driving around Dublin in it, I purposely had the driver's window open. I wanted to hear the car, how loud it was, what noises it was making, and it's obviously there's no engine noise. At low speed, it is silent. And I'll be honest with you, it's dangerous. Pedestrians, you realise pedestrians' first, sense that they use that the car's around is noise. They hear the car, there's a car there, and all of a sudden that's taken away, and it's amazing how many people rely on that. They're walking into the street without looking because they can't hear any cars coming, and then they look. So I found myself, I don't know what sort of driving you'd call it, whether it's defensive, or been defensive, or I don't know what you call it, where I was being extra careful. And if I saw a pedestrian anywhere near the road, I'd always be prepared that they were going to step out in front of it because it was so quiet. Now, this is a low speed, so the faster you go, you do hear like a electric motor type sound. It's not a bad sound at all. And I did notice with the regenerative braking, as you slow down, there was a lovely sort of noise, like, I don't know, something out of a sci-fi movie. It's quite a nice noise, but like I say, at very low speed, you really have to change your driving style, I think, because, 2 or 3 times I've seen pedestrians jump with shock when they see the car moving because there's no noise, and I don't know if there should be something that you can maybe switch on or have something just so they know, when there's pedestrians around, I don't know, but I just felt that was a little bit strange. Anyhow, so driving through Dublin, a little bit of a rattle. It was quite good. There was some speed humps, sleeping policemen, whatever you call them, the little humps in the road. And it did raise the suspension. So obviously it knew where, it needed to raise the suspension. The same at Castle Bellingham where the supercharger is, where there's some speed humps. And the speed humps are scored with loads of cars and must hit them, It raises the suspension up and it's lovely. It gets over that great, So then coming out of Dublin, I went through the port tunnel and it was all fine. I mean, I had cruise control on there, but it wasn't adaptive. But it did warn you, if you was getting too close and all the rest, then you could take action. The same with the lane changing; it wasn't doing it automatically, whatever. But I got onto the motor, got onto the M1, doing 120, 130 kilometers an hour, and I noticed that it wasn't any quieter than my BMW. I mean, I didn't have the sound meter on it, and I have tried recording a lot of this in the car at speed, but for whatever reason, my little dictaphone has been going into manual mode and not automatic mode, and I haven't had the levels right. And I've tried 3 times now to record it whilst I've been driving along, and every time it's been peaking. It sounds horrible. Now, I'm not quite sure how I got away with it with the BMW. Obviously, I need to spend more time, but with not having the car very long, it is harder to do. So anyway, here we are. Here's me talking about it. But so once I got on the motorway, obviously in the BMW I could hear some engine noise, but there's a lot of soundproofing in the BMW. I'm sure that adds to the weight of the BMW. But in terms of wind noise, about the same, maybe slightly noisier in the Tesla. And it was interesting that I could hear the wind noise quite loud, but it wasn't coming from like the mirrors, the wing mirrors or anything. So it actually sounded like it was coming from the back of the car. So as the air was rushing over the roof, and it's quite a sleek shape, I think, the Model S, as towards the back of the car. As it was going downwards, then I could hear it there. So it was like it was behind me, the wind noise, which I thought was quite interesting. But no quieter than the BMW now. Now, the BMW would have wind noise on the wing mirrors, I think, and in different places. But in terms of how noisy, the Tesla wasn't quieter. And at times it felt noisier than the BMW. The other thing on the Tesla, which I thought was quite impressed with, there's very little tyre noise. And these tyres are massive. They're ridiculous size. I don't know if they're 19 or 20 inches. I think it depends on the model, but they're big tyres. I understand there could be foam or something put inside them to make them quiet, which, sounds like a great idea. But it definitely works. But on the motorways, and I'm talking about the smooth motorways now, not the older worn ones, there was definitely a rumble there, but it was quite distant, and it certainly didn't matter, So yeah, so I did 1,000 kilometers on the basic, shall we say, Model S from a couple of years ago with no enhanced autopilot features. So fast forward a little bit, and probably in the last 3 months, the car that I hired yesterday was the one with the full enhanced, driving features with the autopilot, and it really does take some getting used to. I think the first time there was a lot of fear. I think I waited till I was on the motorway before I switched it on. That's probably the best place for it in some ways, because you don't have to think too much about it. So what's interesting about this car that I had with the autopilot is it started over-the-air software updates. It does it through the GSM. I noticed on previous Teslas I've seen online and the one I've had before, it had to have Wi-Fi to do it. Now, I suppose like lots of parts of the world now, you pretty much get unlimited data. So whatever's changed now, it actually downloads the software updates. And when I've hired the car previously, I came to one morning after being parked up outside the hotel, whatever, and it'd done an update. It updated itself, and this is pretty good. And it was a big update because there's one to do with the video, the reversing camera, where basically you can see the two side cameras as well when you're reversing, which is brilliant, fantastic, gives you better visibility. Now, that was a big change. So that's good. It's good now it lets it update without having Wi-Fi. And I think one of the problems with the other car needing Wi-Fi was it was never getting Wi-Fi because when it was in this multi-story car park, there was no Wi-Fi. And the GSM was pretty weak as well, actually. But it didn't use GSM, you see. And then when I had it, I was outside a hotel with it. There was no Wi-Fi either. It wasn't like outside my house. I didn't have it outside my house overnight, to have Wi-Fi and to be charged, whatever. So it wasn't getting the updates. So it's very obvious that there are a lot of features in these updates. So just going on to the autopilot, I mean, again, a similar experience. I found that, on the motorway, it's just incredible. You're setting the speed with one click of towards the stalk, and a double click then does the steering as well. And I find the more you use it, the more intuitive it seems. I think at the beginning, there was occasions I felt I was fighting against it a little bit, and that it was doing things, and I think it's definitely got smoother with the software updates. So the scenarios that shall we say, were problems. Well, no, let's go to the positives first. So there's the autopilot makes it a breeze. You don't have to use the accelerator. You don't have to use the steering wheel. Every so often, you just make sure you move the wheel a bit, and that's it. Going long distances on the motorway, it's absolutely fantastic. It's brilliant. Auto lane changing as well. You flick the lever, you flash the indicator, touch the steering wheel, and it'll move for you as well, which is fantastic. So they really reduce the workload when you're driving long distances. Fantastic. I keep saying fantastic, don't I? It's fantastic. But it's like, yeah, it's good. And the value there, and it's got better. So the negatives. There's a couple of things about autopilot. Now, I've been driving for 30 years, and I'm not saying I'm a good driver. I'm not saying I'm a bad driver either, but I'm an experienced driver. And there's certain things that I do driving that I've noticed. And I've noticed them now because the autopilot doesn't do it. One example is I usually drive a certain part of the lane on the motorway. I've noticed the autopilot's a tendency to go to the left of it a little bit, which I don't like, especially when you're in the outer lane, because then if you're overtaking, you feel very close to the car next to you. So that took a bit of me getting used to that, that it does that. Another occasion, for example, up a long way ahead, there might be something really moving slow, like a tractor. Something that shouldn't really be on the motorway. I do the auto, indicate, and it pulls out. But even though it's pulling out or it's pulled out, and there's no chance it's going to hit that tractor, it'll brake because it's going so much slower. There's the fear that it's either go in front of you or do something, So that was interesting. And then the other occasions that are hard is when it suddenly disengages the autopilot and says, take control, And that happened a couple of times when I was actually in Northern Ireland. And basically what happened was, it was a very windy, high-speed road, let's put it that way. And just one particular turn, it's out, and literally you had to be ready to take over. So now that the software has been updated, I've noticed it's a lot more stable now in terms of, if it's going quite fast on a corner, it'll actually slow down for corners now, which I quite like. So obviously there's a database being built up at the speed that these cars have been driven around these corners. So whereas before it would just like dump you and say, you take control, it's now slowing down and taking the corner. And I noticed that in yesterday's trip, where both parts of the road where it traditionally disengaged suddenly, didn't know what to do. It coped with fine. It actually slowed down a little bit, and it was perfect. So that was good. Also, I did pass a few slow moving vehicles, and it wasn't as aggressive. What I noticed was if you left it too late to tell it to move the lane by indicating, then it could be a little bit aggressive braking. But if you timed it right, give plenty of room with a slow moving vehicle, actually wasn't too bad, Other things that have been improved that I sort of like as well is it is recognising things better. So it's not doing traffic lights yet. Now, I did check the software version yesterday, and it did say the version number, and it said it's bang up to date, but there's no traffic light recognition that I can see. And also, it is recognising other things better, like pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists. It's recognising quite well. Cones are very good as well. It can see lots of cones when the cones are there, which is fantastic, So that's all been working quite well. There was one sort of hitch though, one little problem on the return journey this morning. Now, it had been very foggy. Okay, now, at no point was the visibility really bad. There was no point coming back that the visibility was terrible, but it was definitely reduced. And I didn't know how the camera systems would cope with that, And to be fair, they coped okay, but something strange happened. I mean, the first thing that I didn't like, the auto headlights didn't come on with the fog, and I think they should have done. So basically, in auto mode, the headlights have been coming on if it was dull. If it was dark, they seemed to come on great, but it wasn't coming on in the fog, which I think is a problem. It should know that's fog. It should know it's reduced visibility. And I think internally the system did know that because something strange happened. So as you know, on the Model S, you have the center console. It's not like the 3. You also have this little center console in front of the steering wheel. And in the middle section, I think it's called the visualization, they call it. Now, this is a visualization. The car's portraying to you what it thinks is around the place. And I've noticed sometimes it's a bit delayed, so it's only really, maybe not as good as the car's seeing things. The car's obviously processing stuff, and then it's just giving you like a preview in some ways on the display. So it's quite handy. I mean, I find it handy with the blind spot, so I don't have to turn my head on, there can be a car there and I can see it on the display. That's really, really handy. It tells you, once it's doing the autopilot, you've got these blue tram lines. So it's a nice display. I like it. I like seeing pedestrians walk across in a funny manner across the front. No traffic lights yet on the one I was testing. But anyway, it's good. And then something strange happened. I'm driving in fog. It's fine. It's holding the lane, holding the speed, and slowing down if there's a car in front. But the virtualization stopped working, and a message came up, and it said virtualization is temporarily disabled. It may be enabled at next drive. I thought, what the hell is that, man? I thought something broke. And as I looked at it, it was sort of looking like the lanes were there, but the cars had stopped moving. And there was no detection of cones or anything else. And it did worry me because I'm on a motorway at this point. And it's slightly foggy as well. So basically, I had to put the lights on manually. I had to put the rear fog light on manually. And I would have liked the car to have done that because it's got cameras, You could see from the camera it was foggy. And I'm sure somewhere in its enhanced autopilot system computer, it knew it was foggy, And I think what happened here, it decided to divert its, shall we say, processing information power away from this virtualization, which in many cases is just, nice to have. And I think it was actually using it to control the car. I actually think it was putting the effort in there. So, like I said, the fog, it was fine. It didn't have any problems. I had to control the fog lights. I had to turn the lights on, turn them off again, whatever. It didn't, automatically just didn't work for whatever reason. Maybe it was too bright in the fog. I don't know. And like I said, the visibility was foggy, but it was never to the point where it was dangerously, foggy. But it coped. It kept to the lane. It also lane change. But it was a bit strange, especially when you instructed to change the lane. There was no visualization. You know, even though it still did it, it was fine. There was no visualization. So I said to myself, well, maybe the console needs resetting. Now, there is a way of doing it, but I think it's by pressing both thumb wheels together for about 10 seconds or something. And they say you can do it whilst you're driving. But I'm on a motorway in fog. I'm not going to do it whilst I'm driving. Bearing in mind the speedo's working fine, cruise control, autopilot's all working, the digital map on the left-hand screen was working, moving directions for my navigation. You know what? I could do without the visualization. I could do without it. So anyhow, went through the fog, drove for, I think it was quite patchy. And then all of a sudden, I've been out of the fog maybe for 20 minutes, something like that. It started working again. And it worked fine, and it was okay. And it was worked out for the remainder of the journey. But I found it hard to believe that the fog wasn't a factor. I'm just thinking, you know, when it first happened, I thought, well, maybe the reason the visualization's not working is because it's a problem. There's a problem with the system. It can't work in fog. But it was working. It was still lane changing. It was adjusting the speed right. It was following the lane. It was perfect. There was no difference in the way it behaved. So I can only say that I think there was for whatever reason, I think it disabled it on purpose. I mean, when I think of something locking up or breaking with a computer, it's unusual for it to tell you it's disabled, you know, first off. And secondly, for it to fix itself after a while, once the fog had gone. I don't think that's too much of a coincidence to be just a random problem that happens. So, and I think it does involve a better processing power to keep the visualization up to date. And maybe it just does more processing when it's got less information because it's foggy. That's a theory. It could be rubbish anyway. But I had no problems then with the visualization all the way home. And like I said, the autopilot, especially when you're getting used to it, it did less disengages suddenly. That was very rarely happened on the journey. Obviously roundabouts it doesn't do yet, but you know that and you're ready, you know. Coming off at exits and stuff, I still take over, you know. Little bits of local driving I still do myself, but I can see on the display though, it does say autopilot's available, but I don't normally do much there at all. It is absolutely fantastic in stop-start traffic. I didn't realise when I thought the adaptive cruise control was just for motorway speeds, but I got in a traffic jam and it slowed right down till it stopped. And when it started moving again, it started and stopped and started with the traffic, which is just a godsend. That is just fantastic. There's nothing worse than stop-start traffic, and I know a lot of these adaptive cruise control systems, they stop, but they won't start again. You have to do something, you know, put your foot on the accelerator, whatever. But a Tesla will move, you know, it's pretty good. So all in all, you know, as is probably obvious, I'm very impressed with it. It's a nice driving experience. If I'm doing a long journey, it's the car I want to be in. I probably won't end up with it a Model S. I might do. I know there's changes afoot. There's going to be some big improvements. I think around the Model S. I think because it's ready for a bit of a refresh, maybe a tech refresh as well as a style refresh. I think there's a rumour that might be happening. In terms of the car that I was in that I've driven with the current software, it still needs improvement software-wise. I'd like to see some sort of improvement around visibility. So if it's foggy, I didn't notice it hasn't rained very heavy on the journey, but I haven't noticed any issues in, say, when it's raining or anything like that. But the fog was a concern for me. And the other problem I had with the fog was getting to the fog light switch. Not owning one, not being overly familiar, I had to press the car icon, the lighting, whatever, and I had to select it. Now, when you're going into fog, that's a lot of actions to do. I sort of would have liked the car maybe to said to me, do you want to turn the fog lights on? I don't know, I just feel that I believe that car detected the low visibility or the lower visibility, and it should have had the option. And I do believe that the headlights should have come on. Now, this could all be fixed in later versions. I get the feeling maybe our version in Ireland is a little bit behind, said even the UK, which is probably the closest to us. But our road markings are more like European road markings than the UK ones. There are slight differences. But anyhow, it's a fantastic car. It's horrendously expensive. I think the future is definitely electric. I can't see. There's no big negatives around this car really. I mean, they're going to make a cheaper one. I know there's the what's it called? The Model 3, is it? You know, that's pretty competitive. I know, €45,000 it starts at in Ireland, which is pretty much half the price of a Model S. And then there's another one apparently in the pipeline. I don't think any other electric car manufacturer is anywhere near when it comes to the technology that they're implying, Tesla. And I've noticed a lot of the mainstream manufacturers are literally just taking an ICE car, an internal combustion engine car, and just ripping out the engine and finding somewhere for the battery. And I think that's a mistake. I think the Tesla approach was from the ground up. And it really shows it, you know. So it's a fantastic piece of machinery. I'm going to continue renting them occasionally, and I'll definitely be on the lookout for one. But I'm going to hold off, I think, until we see what Tesla has. And I'd say hopefully before the end of this year we should have more information on what's out there. And yeah, well, thank you for listening. That's my take on Tesla Model S as of September 2020. And if there's any more updates or information, I'll do another podcast. So, podcast. Thank you for listening.